Hey everybody, welcome back to Tech Talk Education. This is the seventh movie in a series of movies that I'm doing on Metasploitable 2. In this movie, we're going to talk about a product called Mutilidae, which is used for pen testing of websites, teaching you how to find out about how websites can be vulnerable and how they can be hacked. And also, I would like to start encouraging you, if you like my channel, please subscribe to it and hit that little button so that you get notified when I put out a new movie. But also, if you would be so kind, I would love it if you would share it with others who are learning technology. I would sure appreciate it, and it helps me and my channel. Thank you, and let's get started. I think this should be a lot of fun. Well, as I'm sure you're probably aware, the majority of people spend the majority of their time on the web. The web seems to be a thing that we have a hard time getting away from, even when it comes to things like social media, unless you're on your smartphone, and then that's a different story. We use apps. But what we want you to know is that anytime you're getting data from across the web, you are issuing HTTP requests. And a lot of times these websites and stuff like that are vulnerable. And so there is an organization called OWASP. It stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. I just want to show this to you real quickly. I'm going to type OWASP in the search bar, and I'm going to go to the OWASP Foundation. It's called OWASP. And what they do is they're in the business of showing how you can discover vulnerabilities in your websites and training you. They have a big training outreach and things like that. And so what we want to do now is we want to be cognizant of OWASP. Well, one of the ways that we can get training in OWASP is through a product called Mutilidae, and we're going to work on that in just a minute. And there's two ways that we're going to work on it. The first way is to use it inside Metasploitable 2, but I have found that that's a little bit older version of Mutilidae. And a lot of the stuff we want to do, we need to do with a localized version of Mutilidae on our Kali machine rather than on the Metasploitable box. Nonetheless, I want to show you what this looks like in both cases, and then we'll go through a little bit of a tutorial on the HTTP GET method. So let's get started with that. It should be a lot of fun. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to a PowerPoint presentation and go through a little bit on the HTTP method. Okay, so this is going to be just a short and sweet little PowerPoint slide deck. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Mutilidae. It might be fairly weird to you when you first encounter it, and indeed it is, but you know, it's one of these apps where a gentleman or a couple of gentlemen or folks decided to get together and write a web-based app that would do a lot of training for you in terms of website security. So it's called Mutilidae. And here's how it got its term. It's referring to a family of insects that are called the velvet ant. They're not really an ant, they're actually a wasp. But the female doesn't have any wings, and so very often she is mistaken for an ant. That's why it's called the velvet ant. The term Mutilidae comes from the scientific name for the insects, and it includes various species of these things found around the world, it comes out of the Hymenoptera order, which includes things like bees, wasps, and ants. They're known for their striking appearance. They're a deep red, and they're covered in dense and colorful and velvety hair, and their stingers are super painful. So that's where Mutilidae, the phrase, comes from. Now let's take a look at something else here. We want to talk about what's called the GET method. There are four of these. There's GET and PUT and a couple of others. And in this case, what we want to do is we just want to talk about the GET method itself. It's called a method because it's code that is designed to do something. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to get stuff from a website. So that's why it's called the GET method. When you hear the term method, you can think of it as a colloquial term for a piece of code that does some work for us, and it's very specific work. So we're talking about the HTTP protocol, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, invented by Tim Berners-Lee. and then the get method, and there are other methods like put and post and so forth. And so in this case, when a host wants to receive data, like from a web page or an image or a document, something like that, from a web server, what they're going to do is they're going to issue an HTTP GET request to the server. Now, they don't even know they're doing that, but it's a GET request. It's saying, hey, show me what you've got. I want to see what's on your website. And it will send over all the appropriate things. Other HTTP methods, such as post or put, use what is called a request body, but you need to know that HTTP GET does not use a request body. Instead, what happens is you post your parameters to the GET method directly into the URL, and then you issue a query string. Here's an example of it on the screen in the dark gray. It says GET, and then you have the URL where it's supposed to go. So in this case, we're going to go to example page question mark param1 equals value and param2 equals value 2. Then we tell it that this is an HTTP /1.1, and then we tell it the host name, host www.example.com in this case. Now, a couple of interesting things to point out here. First of all, we tell it that we have a GET command, and we have this question mark right here. What does that mean? Well, it means that we are talking to a PHP piece of code on a server, and we're passing in parameter values to that PHP so that it can parse it and return back to us what we're looking for in terms of what we're trying to get out of the web page. Now, remember, the GET is just bringing back documents, pictures, things like that. It is not doing other work like putting things onto a website. That would be part of the post method. Now, here's an interesting term. I've never heard this term before until I was researching this. The GET method is what is called idempotent. I can't even say that very well. Idempotent. And what it means is that you can send out hundreds of the same kind of requests, dozens, tens, large numbers of the requests. And if they're all the same kind of request, it's just going to return back one thing. So it's idempotent. It means it's going to just return it back one, even though you may have sent out several of the same requests. You should also know that GET requests are cached by the client. They're also cached by proxy servers, which are standing in the way of the website and doing some proxy work on its behalf. And so caching makes the retrieval of the information much faster. So the very first time you issue an HTTP GET on a website, that data is cached for a time, and it's also cached on proxy servers. And the next time you do a GET, these expire, by the way, but the next time you do a GET in a short term of time, you'll get a much faster response. Now, you need to remember that when we're sending data using a GET request, it is visible. And so people can look at it and they can see what's going on in the GET request. So that has some serious cybersecurity ramifications. Now, there's another thing you need to know about the HTTP GET method, and that is that it doesn't allow a normal new line escape sequence. We can't expect it to use a new line escape sequence that we might draw in. What we have to do, because this is an older method, it's been around a long time, is we have to use both a carriage return escape sequence and a new line escape sequence. And you need to be aware that this works in both the head and the body of the page. If you've had any HTML training, you know what I'm talking about. HTML pages have a head and they have a body. There's two sections generally to an HTML page. And when we issue a GET request, it's going to look at both sections, the GET section and the head section and the body section. So what we have to do when we are issuing a GET request is we have to issue what's called a carriage return. It's a \R. \R stands, that's an escape sequence. We call them escape sequences. And we're actually physically telling the computer, do a carriage return. And then we have to do a new line. So the whole thing looks like \R\N. Now, to get out of head or to get out of body, we issue two of those things. So it looks like this, \R\N, \R\N. And generally speaking, there's a way to get into just the head and look at what's happening in the head. But there's also a way, if we issue just a generic command to this, we would get the entire shooting match. So we get all of the code inside the web page, which actually is a really good way if you're looking for vulnerabilities in a web page to see how it was written and what you could do to circumvent that page. Okay, so we've talked about the HTTP GET method. There's a lot more to know. In another movie, I showed you all the codes that come out of a GET, like 200 is success and 404 is not found and things like that. So that's a whole nother topic. And then the other methods are another topic. But in this case, what we're going to do is try using the GET method in Kali against Mutilidae. And I want to show you two different ways that we're going to do that. The first way we're going to do it is by trying to get into Mutilidae through Metasploitable 2, because it is installed on Metasploitable 2. Then we're going to find that the command that we're using in going against Mutilidae on Metasploitable 2, one of those commands is not going to work, and it's going to work better if we use a localized version of Mutilidae. So we'll finish off this movie by going ahead and installing Mutilidae version 2 on our Kali machine. Okay, so here I am now. I'm in Kali Linux. I have pfSense running. Let me show that to you. Here it is right here, and there's Metasploitable 2, and here's Kali. And what I want to do now is I want to go out and I want to look at my Metasploitable 2 box via the website. So I'm going to type in 192.168.1.101. That is my particular Metasploitable instance, and it's running in my virtualized ethical hacking laboratory here at my pen testing lab. And so I hit enter, and it returns a page to me for Metasploitable 2. And we've looked at this before. We get a bunch of stuff like Tweaky and PHPMyAdmin and Mutilidae and darn vulnerable web app and WebDAV. We've talked about WebDAV earlier. Now what we're going to do is navigate into Mutilidae. So I hit this button here, and there we are. Now Mutilidae is designed to teach you about website vulnerabilities, and it's all about OWASP. I want to go through just a couple of introductory things here to show this to you. First of all, you can see that it's a deliberately vulnerable PHP scripts. These are PHP. You've got a security level here, so if you click that, you can toggle your security level like that. And then you can toggle hints, so you can turn hints on and on, like so. So hint level 1 is the script kiddie, and level 2 is a noob, and so forth. And so we've got our hints disabled, and we've got our security level at level 0, which is fine. Then as you look down here, you've got this drop-down menus here, or fly-out menus, and you can see that they're showing you the OWASP top 10. Now that's an important term, because what it means is that OWASP has gone out, they do this every year, and they find out, they're like, hey, what's happening on around the planet in terms of website vulnerabilities, and then they craft their top 10. And so in this case, in the case of Mutilidae, everything is arranged in order of the things that happen on websites on a daily basis thanks to hackers. And so one of them is a SQL injection. We've got a thing called cross-site scripting, broken authentication, and other things like that. Now additionally, you can see that they're focused on OWASP. That's the OWASP logo right there. And if you were to click that, it would take you to OWASP. There are some Mozilla add-ins that we can add as well. And then there is a YouTube training site called Webponized, and it's pretty good, but this is how I discovered that we're probably going to have to run things on a local copy of Mutilidae, as some of the commands that we would use off of the Webponized YouTube sites don't work if we're running against Metasploitable 2. There is a new version of Mutilidae. It's called Mutilidae 2, and it's put out by OWASP. I wanted to show this website to you. And so one of the things that you can do is you have to realize that Mutilidae is what is called a content management system. It's a CMS. And so what it needs to have is it needs to have PHP, and it needs to have a SQL, some sort of a database, a SQL database inside of it to keep track of usernames and passwords and things like that, and other application requirements. Now, the general way that you would do this is you would install what's called a LAMP stack. LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So we would run things on LAMP, on Linux. we would have Apache server running, which we have found out natively can be run on Kali Linux. Then we have MySQL, which is a very popular open source database system. And then we have PHP, which is the language that's used predominantly in CMS solutions. However, we can also run it using Docker, and that's the way that we're going to run it. We're going to install it using Docker, because of that whole LAMP stack comes pre-configured and ready to roll, and we can just blow it up and run it right on Kali, and we won't have a problem with that. So that's where we're headed. But in the interim, what we want to do is we want to try issuing some commands against Metilidae. I should also show you down here at the bottom, the two people that developed this were Adrian Iron Geek Crenshaw and Jeremy Druin, and I think now that it's been updated, there are a couple of different people that are working on it as well. Here's Iron Geek's website. It's really a terrible website. Let me show this to you. If I open the link in the tab, it's very difficult to look at. I'm not sure why it shows up that way, but I guess it's okay. The colors are kind of weird. It's fine. Never mind. I'm not bad-mouthing it. It's fine. And then also you need to know that we are using PHP version 5.2.4 on Ubuntu 5.10, and of course we're using Mozilla Firefox. Now, one of the things, speaking of Mozilla, that you should know about is that we have an extension running, and the extension that you should install in Firefox is called HTTP Header Live. And if you go to Manage Extensions here, and then you look for HTTP Live, Header Live, there it is right there, you'll find it on the Firefox Extension Store. You should install that because it helps you just quickly get into Metilidae and get some HTTP GET requests back from that particular site. So here we go. First thing to look at is that you have all of these pages here. So once you switch to the Metilidae site, the part of Metasploitable 2, you notice here that it's giving you the IP address 192.168.1.101, but then it goes /Metilidae. So now we're in the Metilidae folder in Metasploitable 2, and we've run the index.php page, and then we're telling it oh, go get the page called home PHP. What does that look like? Let's go take a look and see if we can figure that out. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and bring up Metasploitable here. I'm going to get out of that and log in. So I'm going to log out because I was logged into it before. I'll log out, and then I'm going to show you how to log in. You're given the passwords right there. So we log in with Metasploit Framework Admin, MSF Admin, and password is MSF Admin, like that. And we can clear the screen. And now what we're going to do is change to the area where websites are kept on a typical Ubuntu server, and they're kept in /var/www, and hit enter and do an ls. Let me do an ls -l so that it's a little bit easier to see the output here. And you can see here that we have index.php, which is exactly what we talked about. If you look up near the top of the screen there, you can see that we've got index.php that we were running initially, and then we have Metilidae, and you can see that there's a D to the left of that Metilidae string in bit 1 there, and that's telling you that that is a directory. So there's a Metilidae directory. So let's cd into that, Metilidae, and then we do an ls -l, and we get a bunch of stuff. So these are all the websites that are available out on Metilidae on Metasploitable 2. These are all the different PHP pages, and you can directly reference any of those. There's one thing I would like to point out to you, and it's this thing called robots.txt right there in the middle of the page. And what that is it's kind of a shortcut. It's telling sites that crawl you not to look at these particular directories or files, and you can cat out robots.txt, and you can see what the formation of that looks like. So it's saying to disallow, don't go into passwords when you crawl me, don't go into passwords, don't go into config inc, etc., etc. So that's what that's about. Let me do an ls -l here, and let's try one of these. So let's go take a look at, let's see, show log.php. Okay, well let's go try that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try hacking this way. So I'm going to say show tacklog.php. And let's see, I get an error there because I was not keying in the right sequence of commands here. Let me go back there and get that. And it's show, yeah, I did it right, show-log.php. And what it's giving you is nothing. There's nothing in the log page here. That's the idea, or at least one of the ideas that we're trying to get at, is that when you are looking at a website like this and you see a question mark right here, this is telling you, well, the PHP is telling you as well, but the question mark is telling you that it's a query. And it's saying, hey, I want you to show me this particular page. So let's try another one here. There's one that's really interesting here. It's called Pin Test Tool Lookup. So let's put that in here. So I type in pin test, it's pin dash test dash tool dash lookup, or TAC. I like to call it TAC. And we hit enter. And it takes you to a different page. And then we can say, well, select pin test tool. And please choose a tool. Show all. Like that. So all I'm trying to really show you here is that you can navigate around in the Metasploitable site utility just by going in and keying in different redirections and different queries for different pages in the Mutility website. And I will put a link on the page so that you can, when I publish this movie, so that you can go look at others that are out there. There's quite a few that are out there for this. Okay, well, that's pretty cool. I'm going to go back home here. And now what I have done is I have installed this extension. It's called HTTP Header Live. I'm going to go ahead and let that run here, like so. This is what it looks like. Bring it off to the side here. And then I'm going to click and go back home. What it's going to do is do a GET request. And it's just going out and getting information off of the page right now, off of the home page. And you can read these HTTP/1.1 requests here, like 200 is successful. So that's really good. And I went ahead and added it to another page. And you can scroll down here and see what it's doing. It's grabbing the favicon. Let me go to the top here. That's my problem. I keep going. It stops you at the bottom. I want to go to the top and look down here. So it's saying that our initial request was on Mutility index PHP pages home PHP. Now, what can you get out of this? Well, you get some pretty good stuff. You can get cookies, and this is a way that you might be able to use Burp Suite to go in and attack the server in such a way, knowing a cookie. You can also tell that it's running Apache version 2.2, which is great. We love Apache. And we get a success, and then it's telling us that we've got a JavaScript code here. It's a bookmark site. We've got some more JavaScript, DDS smooth menu, and that's okay. And then we had a jQuery. We did a jQuery on this thing, and that's okay. And we loaded a favicon. So this is the idea of what you're getting. The concept is you want to get back the entire web page so that you can look at it, figure out how the thing is constructed so you can make more sense out of it in terms of figuring out if it's got a vulnerability or not. So what we did was we loaded an extension here. It's called HTTP Header Live. We just run that. We click home here on Mutility right there, and it does a GET request, and that's all good, and we can kill that. That's one way that you can look at the GET requests on a web page using Firefox. Now there is one last thing that I wanted to point out to you. I'll rerun this again one more time and point to the home. And that is that you have both requests. So at the very top, this is a request. This is a server header. And these are called HTTP headers. And that's all I wanted to point out to you there. Now there's another way that we can get at this. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize Firefox right now and bring up my command prompt. I'm going to change to root. So I'm going to do a sudo su. Because it makes sense to run everything out of root at this juncture. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use netcat to try to get into the Metasploitable box and return the web page back to us. Now this is going to fail, but I do want to show you the elements of the command and how it works. So we're going to use an echo command, and you remember that echo sends things back to the, we can put it into a file, or if we don't put it into a file, echo will send it back to the screen. And we're going to put in two switches here. So we're going to say tac N and E. Now the N means do not put a new line on the end of this request. Why is that? Well, because we have to deliberately code in carriage return new line when we're writing out a request to Metsploitable like this. We don't want echo to put the new line in there for us, because by default it will. Likewise, the use of the tac E switch there says that we're going to use escape sequences in the code that we're going to write. And so what we're doing is we're essentially bypassing echo's ability to put in a new line, and we're saying, hey, we're going to supply our own new lines. Now we put in double quotes here, and we type in our GET request. Then we tell it a slash. Then we want to get HTTP /1.1, which is what we looked at when we were looking at the Firefox stuff. And here comes these escape sequences. So we do a \R \N. So that is putting in a carriage return and a new line, which is what HTTP GET has to see. So that's why we're turning it off in echo, and why we're supplying it here. Then what we do is we tell it, okay, the host that we want you to go to is we want you to go into 192.168.1.101, and then I'm going to put in /Metsploitable. And then we have to append not one but two of these, \R \N, \R \N, because it's doing both it's doing both the head and the body of the page. And then I'll put a double quotes on here, and I will pipe that into my local computer, my local Kali computer. So I'm going to put it into /temp, and I'm going to call this thing request. Now please remember that if you're using a single line redirection operator, it's going to overwrite any file out there that's called request. So what we're doing here is we're telling, hey, go into the temp folder and then call this file request. And so we hit enter. And now if we cat temp request, we get the output. Now this is showing us a GET. This is all this is, and it's telling us that this works. So we have that. Now what we wanted to do was we want to try and redirect that into Metsploitable, and this is where the command is going to fail. So getting the request from Metsploitable is not a problem, but getting putting this request into Metsploitable on Metasploitable is. And I'll show you where you run into the problem. So if you try and ping 192.168.101/Metsploitable, it doesn't have an address known to it. However, if I ping 101, it will come back and it will tell me that it has an address. So that's where we're going to get into trouble. But I want to show you why you get into trouble with that. Okay, so let's try grabbing this a different way. So we're going to use netcat, and what we want to do is we want to redirect that request that we put into temp request. We want to redirect that into netcat to tell us to go fetch the page off of the Metsploitable server on Metasploitable 2. So if I go home here, I'm going to grab this URL here, right click and copy it. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to type in netcat. Now netcat can be abbreviated NC now, or you can type in netcat. Either way works, like that. And then what we're going to do is give it the Metsploitable IP. So I right click and paste the selection like that. And then what I want to do is tell it to go into port 80. And I want to redirect temp request into this particular request right here. So the redirect means that we're going to get it out of /temp request. So we reverse it. We go to a less than sign, or this is called an angle bracket. This is a left angle bracket, and we're going to switch it. So when we were doing a redirect into a file, it was a greater than sign or a right angle bracket. Now we're going to take whatever the contents of temp request is, redirect it into this command to see what we can get out of it. So I'm going to tell it to redirect out of temp request. So let's take a look at this. We're issuing the netcat command, to this URL. We're telling it to look at port 80, and then we bring in temp request into this file, and we hit enter, and it fails. And that's because there's no forward lookup host for it. It doesn't have an IP address. What's happening here is natively you can hit it this way, and of course there are other ways to hit Mutilidae. We need to do some more movies on this because it's a very, very powerful tool. But in this case, what's happening is it's being hosted on Metasploitable 2, and so this command here isn't going to work. The way we have to get around that is we're going to install Mutilidae 2 on Kali Linux and see if we can get the command working that way. So I've decided that I'm going to cut the movie short right here. I've gone a little long anyway, and it's going to take a little bit to get us through this whole Mutilidae installation using Docker on your Kali machine. So I think I'll do a separate movie on that, and then we'll do some more Mutilidae movies as we go along here, and we'll discover a little bit more about Mutilidae. So Mutilidae is very, very useful for learning the OWASP top 10, and then learning how we exploit vulnerabilities inside websites. It's a tutorial thing is what it is, and it's really cool. But we need to do a lot more work with that. So I'm going to postpone this movie now, keep it right here. You've done quite a bit of work already. And then in the next movie, what we're going to do is install Mutilidae on Kali and then begin to use it that way. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you in the next video. Have a great day.